Of course, we understand that four RAF planes took off from Cyprus, accompanied by refueling jets. Was that the extent of British involvement, or did it go wider than that?
It would have gone much wider than that in terms of logistics support, in terms particularly of intelligence understanding the picture. As the Prime Minister said earlier on today, these strikes were limited, they're proportional and very directed. And I think everyone's very conscious of the danger of collateral damage. So the intelligence picture, building up a picture of what the Houthis are doing, would have been very, very much a part of that as well. And of course, not to say that then these strikes might not be repeated as well. And so, yes, we saw last night 4 Typhoons being employed with the Voyager air-to-air refueling aircraft to keep them going. But it's not to say other things couldn't happen in the future. And indeed, there hasn't been, if you like, a hinterland of intelligence and preparation prior to this operation as well. So the full extent of our involvement may take some time to come out. But yes, what we saw was the aircraft as well.
And we engaged quite widely with our allies, including a USA submarine, which fired dozens of missiles into 60 targets in the Yemen. This follows the attack on HMS Diamond, which was a very sophisticated attack, including cruise missiles and anti-ship missiles, as well as drones. We've heard from the Ministry of Defence that is actually the largest attack on any British warship since the Falklands conflict. Do you think these airstrikes are a direct response to that? Is that following significant warnings from the UK government, or almost the thing that led to these strikes?
Yeah, I think exactly that. So prior to that, the British and the Americans had basically, if you like, been acting as kind of as fielders, batting down missiles that were targeted at Israeli targets or more general shipping. But the attack on HMS Diamond looks like a very deliberate attack. As you say, it was a combination attack, an anti-ship ballistic missile, drones, and a missile has been fired. So a very deliberate attempt to attack that ship, and that, of course, is quite deliberate. I mean, HMS Diamond is prime function is anti-aircraft and anti-missile defence, and it's probably amongst the most sophisticated in the world. The Type 45 destroyers are exactly that. They're designed to defend fleets and areas against missiles, aircraft, and so forth. So trying to throwing everything at them in an attempt to disable that ship or even to sink it would have been a very deliberate tactic. And I think that was the point where people said enough is enough, because we need to have that defence in place.
Hey, Colonel Diggins, you say that we don't know, and we clearly can't know, whether this will be the end of these strategic strikes against the Houthi rebels in the Yemen. Do you think there is danger of wider contagion? I see that Iran has come out today in no uncertain terms and condemned this. The rebels themselves have said there will be severe consequences. Saudi Arabia slightly sort of pulled their punches, but certainly were not overly enamoured with this having taken place in their backyard, as they would view it. Is there going to be wider instability in the Middle East caused by these sort of strikes by the USA and the United Kingdom acting together?
Well, there'll certainly be some kind of response. I mean, of course, the instability in the Red Sea was caused by the Houthis. I mean, the Houthis are the ones who've been carrying out the attacks. So this is a defensive response to them. And I absolutely get the point. This is legitimate and proportionate, everything that goes with that. The reaction was always to be expected. And those ordering the attack will have expected something. So far, we've seen a significant uptick in the rhetoric, and you'll recall earlier in the current Middle East crisis between Israel and Gaza, and particularly Palestine, that Hezbollah itself upped its rhetoric, but didn't actually do very much in terms of actions on the ground. They continue to fire rockets into northern Israel, but not on a markedly larger number than they had done in the past. So we can expect an uptick in rhetoric, and there may well be some reactions. The Saudi point is a really good point. The Saudis had just literally in the last year and a half, extricated themselves from the civil war that's ongoing in the Yemen at the moment. And there's supposed to be some kind of ceasefire in place, dating from about April 22, and from April 23 this year, Iran was supposed to stop arming the Houthis. And so Saudi will be concerned about what's going on. And of course, Saudi Arabia is an ally of ours as well. They will be concerned that what happens, it causes this civil war to break out again and force them again to find themselves involved in dealing with the very difficult internal politics of the Yemen as well. So their concern, I think, is natural, but I'm not sure that it necessarily means they're going to be involved. They'll be trying to avoid this becoming a larger conflict than before. They have absolutely no interest in seeing the Red Sea closed. They want to keep that open, keep the oil flowing, to keep their revenues going. So, I mean, they will be quietly applauding what we're doing, albeit having to show some kind of rhetorical concern on the surface.
And you mentioned the fact that these Houthi rebels have been armed by Iran. It seems to me that, you know, a series of military drones and surface-to-ship missiles are fairly sophisticated weaponry. Is it your view that that is continuing to be provided by Iran? Iran is supporting and directing these operations in the Yemen?
I don't think they're directing them, and the Iranian line, and of course, is the Iranian line. So, subject to a certain degree of skepticism, the Iranian line is that these are allies in what they call the axis of resistance, but they're not their proxies. And I think that's probably more true than the opposite case, that they are operating directly, if you like, under Iranian military on operational control. I don't think they are. Whether they've actually stuck by the terms of the agreement they made, and this agreement was brokered by China in April of this year to stop arming the Houthis, I don't have intelligence picture on that. But that's what they were supposed to do. And the reason for that, the justification for that, was that would then allow Iran, with Saudi Arabia, to join the BRICS organization, that grouping of countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which are looking to try and develop their own economic development, slightly independent of the West. But China would not have done that. China's very cautious in some areas. They've been very cautious about taking Iran into that fold if they're also actively arming the Houthis. So the condition that they set, which also led to a degree of rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, was that Houthis were no longer to be armed. Now, whether the rogue elements in the Iranian state are continuing to arm them, I don't have a judgment on, because I don't have the information. But that certainly was the picture. But they would have left the Houthis with a significant amount of arms and ammunition. And I think what may be worth thinking about is whether what the Houthis did in their very quick reaction to support Hamas and what they did in Gaza was them saying, really, we're still here. You, Iran, has effectively moved on from this conflict and are now trying to come together with Saudi Arabia. But actually, we're still here. We're still in conflict with what's going on in the south. Don't forget about us. So those internal dynamics and challenges, I think, are very tricky to disentangle, but may well lay behind what the Houthis are doing.
And of course, the Houthi rebels have said that a lot of their action against shipping in the Red Sea, which is one of the busiest global shipping lanes, is in support of Hamas. Do you think we can see an end to this conflict and disturbance in the Red Sea without a ceasefire, a sustained ceasefire, an end of hostilities in Gaza?
That's difficult to know. There's no question about it. There is a significant degree of solidarity amongst the Yemeni population. And it's worth noting, even though there is this internal struggle going on within the Yemen, the support for the Palestinians amongst the Yemenis as a whole is very, very high. So what the Houthis have been doing is seen as popular, even amongst those elements in the Yemeni population who don't otherwise have much time for the Houthis. Whether or not it stops when and if we get a ceasefire will be hard to judge. That's what the Houthis said will happen. So if we do get a ceasefire, it'd be interesting to see whether they stop it as well. I mean, that's what they're saying. That's what they say is their objective. It'd be interesting to see whether they actually stick by their word.
And finally, one of the questions we're asking people here today on talkTV is, it is a massively unstable world. 2024 is a huge year in terms of elections. We have a conflict with several conflicts now in the Middle East. We have a conflict in Europe. There's increasing tensions between China and Taiwan. North and South Korea still remain opposed to each other in a slightly less active, but certainly increasingly active way. We're asking our viewers, are we sort of moving towards a wider global conflict? It's beginning to feel like that, I think, for lots of people. Is that something we should be concerned about, a sort of equivalent of a World War III?
I think we're still quite away from World War III. What we have got is a very unstable world, exactly as you have said, and it also highlights particularly the weaknesses in both our diplomacy and our armed forces. We absolutely need to think very much harder about what we need. Up until now, I mean, and really since the end of the Cold War, defence expenditure has been regarded almost like discretionary expenditure. I mean, even Rishi Sunak, who has just announced a package of aid to Ukraine, has said that we'll reach 2.5% of GDP when the circumstances allow. You compare that with Russia at the moment. Russia is spending 1/3 of all its government expenditure is going on its military needs. Now, we might not want to do it to that level, but that gives that level of challenge and threat that we are facing. And while we can deal with a lot of kind of threat mass with highly sophisticated weapons, there is an absolute need. We need the ships, we need the people, we need the planes, and we just don't have them. You know, we haven't got the frigates. We've got one working aircraft carrier at the moment, which is sitting in Portsmouth. Our armed forces are at the lowest level they've been since the Napoleonic Wars. And we are in a desperate state. You know, the days when you could just treat defence as discretionary expenditure are over. And the sooner the government, of whatever colour, whatever stripe, picks up that baton and says, we now need to bolster our defence, bolster our diplomacy efforts to deal with a very unstable world, the better, frankly.